Hello, everyone. Good morning. I think um, I think we should get the ball rolling. I'll just allow a few more seconds to get everybody settled in, and we'll kick it off. Awesome. Okay. All right. I think we should get the ball rolling here. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today. We greatly appreciate it. First, a little about our webinar contributors. My name is Suhak Kansara. I am the founder and CEO of VPro. I have an architecture and urban planning degree with more than 20 years in the industry. As a planner myself, I speak your planning language, but at the same time, I wear the technology hat through Esri lenses, allowing me to bridge the gap between planning and GIS. We have Michael Schmitz here. He's a principal with Antero Group who brings over 15 years of expertise in GIS, zoning, grant writing, and planning with a focus on innovative and community-driven solutions for growing cities. We also have Sean Norton from Antero Group. He comes with more than 15 years of experience in both public and private sectors, who leverages hands-on experience. Who leverages hands-on expertise in public engagement, strategic planning, and regional development with a background in design and communication in order to deliver exceptional results across a broad spectrum of projects. And finally, we have Ryan Wells. He is the Director of Planning and Development Services at the City of Fate. He has over 20 years of public, private, and nonprofit sector planning and land use management experience. He's currently focused on managing development within a rapidly growing suburban city through strategic growth planning and fiscally minded land use policy. I can't wait to hear from him his firsthand because he has some fantastic information to solve. Just to get the ball rolling, what you can expect today. We believe that the cities are changing rapidly, so are the various approaches to handle those changes. And the today's presentation is geared around pre-planning and post-planning processes. The pre-planning process includes identification of specific planning issue and the creative approach to analyze and handle those planning issues, such as housing and zoning rewrite process. And the post-planning process will include evaluation of the same policy once implemented. How do you keep supporting the results derived from the pre-planning processes through fiscal impact analysis and many other analytical GIS tools? Our intention would be to share the innovation that went behind identifying these approaches and lessons learned. We will also be sharing real-world projects and case studies. So it is a first-hand information, not just academic driven. You should also be able to have a few take-home points that can be directly applied to your day-to-day workflows. Of course, we'll ensure that we keep healthy amount of time also for Q&A. But before we begin, I just want to ask what kind of audience we have today. So I'll just take a little poll if you don't mind helping me out here. So I'm going to start that. All right. I am asking you all a question. Basically, we're just trying to figure out your background. I would appreciate that. Thank you. I'll keep it open just for a little bit more. Awesome. I'm going to end the poll. I think we have about 10 people left. I'm just going to wait for a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll just to share the results with everybody. I think we have more folks coming from local government. We got handful consultants and of course, pretty decent presence for academics. It's good to know that we don't have any NASA astronauts here today. So I think they have better things to do. Awesome. Well, then let's begin. We want to invite Michael Schmitz from Antero Group, and he will kick off the webinar. Michael, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Suhag, and welcome everyone. Appreciate you joining us today. Get through some of our slides here. So I'm Michael Schmitz with the Antero Group. We are an urban planning civil engineering firm based in Denton, Texas, north of Dallas. Also have offices in Chicago and Denver. Our specialty really is supporting communities experiencing growth-related challenges, setting them up for success with implementing plans and policies, which we'll go through a couple of those examples. For any of you that were recently at NPC 25 in Denver and visited us at the our exhibit booth, that will be familiar to you, as well as the Focus North Texas conference this year. So our first case study here is the housing study, 24 housing study that we did for the city of Sanger. The objectives of this was looking at research and analysis. So we wanted to provide an understanding of the city of Sanger's current and future housing landscape, uh, and then to determine if current composition, the makeup of those components meet the current city's needs. Ultimately, we would look at recommendations for the target housing composition adjustment, which is a 2016. The city had a previous study completed where they were identifying how many homes in the square footage for single family, 1300, 1499, 1500 to 1999, multifamily. What is the composition? So we wanted to look and make additional recommendations to that. And then the most important thing and the key takeaway, which we'll get to, tools and resources, develop an interactive tool to support development decision making. So in part of analyzing and looking, we always look at data. Data always helps us inform those decisions and recommendations. It helps us understand and tell the story. So we look at demographic data, economic data, housing demand, population, particularly with housing. That's very, very important. We took an approach and looked at ACS data, Texas Water Development Board, Texas state demographic data. There's multiple different data sources, and we like to collect all those and try to see where there's a trend. And then additionally, you need to look at local on the ground information that the publicly available data is not going to know. They're not going to know who's talking to economic development in terms of businesses locating there. And the types of housing that you're going to need to support those businesses. Zoning, we look at zoning and land use. That is most planners, and you all know that's a big indicator of what can go there and be built in the future, as well as looking at infrastructure and capacity is a big component as well. If the city doesn't have infrastructure, you're not going to be able to grow like you need to. So we looked at future housing developments as well. Number of additional housing units. So these were all planned. As some of you in city government know, whether you're planning, development, engineering, city management, developers will often come to the city, inquire about locating there. And so these were all developments that we felt and worked with the city that were real and coming in the next couple of years. So we wanted to add those to the housing matrix to see the current, what the composition was of current, what projected was, and then that which projected includes the in process population for those new additions, and then the 2016 target. So how do we fare? How do we fare there? So for example, look at the multifamily. Current was 13% of the overall houses. 24% was going to be the projected with proposed and in progress, and then 2016 was the target that they set back in 2016. That's at 12%. So our ultimate recommendations, which we align here, single family, we reduced that to 25% for those less than 1499 square feet. We understood there was likely going to be continued demand for this, but the developments between 1599 were likely to capture much of that same market. High demand for category of 15 to 1999. So you're looking at young professionals, those kind of maybe getting out of their starter homes. Maintain that at 30%. Single family greater than 2,000. Likely a high demand category, a sizable market segment capable of affording larger homes. Maintain that also at 25%. You'll notice here multifamily, likely a need to increase. Multiple factors, and we can get into that later, but 17%, increase 17% was the recommendation. So as I mentioned earlier, Implementation, all of us, we like to know after a study what is the deliverable and how are we going to use these recommendations to move forward. Uh, City of Sanger folks are currently using this today. We had a recent council workshop with them, and they're very happy with it. And this allows to uh, populate and plug in new developments. So when a new developer comes in and we know the makeup and the number of units and how that mix is going to be, they'll know how it's going to impact the overall 24 target composition alignment. And so we put in there the number of units for the various square footage, and that will help them determine where and when to grow. So also another case study and part of this population growth and pre-planning, zoning, subdivision, side ordinance. Many of you may be aware of all of the legislative updates that our state legislator comes out with, and so we do a diagnostic of these ordinances, looking at making sure that those align with those. But additionally, the objectives, we need to make sure that they align with the community vision and accommodate that future growth. It needs to align with the comprehensive plan, which was a big component of both the housing study and the zoning subdivision ordinance. Um, Incorporate figures, diagrams, color-coded tables. And many of us who often go and have to reference code and language, it's table and text after text. And so, we look at this through the lens of helping out staff, helping out developers, helping out the public. And so we really kind of do develop these infographics to help out everyone better interpret the language whenever a zoning case comes about. We improved and streamlined the procedural efficiencies. When it goes to planning and zoning, when it goes to council, when it goes to staff. And then we address conflicts and staff pain points. So things that the staff needs to better help them better understand the process. So a couple of key takeaways that I like to go back and tell this. So collaborate when you start the process. Collaborate with everyone. Work with everyone in the community for the housing study. We need to work with economic development, realtors, the development community. So this isn't just staff. We work with the school district to understand their needs and population growth. Same thing goes with zoning and land use in your comprehensive plan. Research. So none of us, is like as much as we like to say, none of us has a magic 8 ball. So we always can't predict the future, but we can try our best with the available data and making sure that we're able to adapt when real-time information comes out. And that kind of gets back to evaluate and monitor infrastructure capacity, because there may be a new development that when this plan was put into place that we are unaware of. Reference and update the policy document as needed. Again, that's a good reminder for us to constantly, for these tools and resources, for them to be the most accurate. Update them whenever a need and change in the economy, whether that's locally or globally, occurs. And then tools and resources, develop tools and resources to help you implement those. Have a champion within the community. A lot of times it is going to be some of the same folks, volunteers, but also city staff, and the consultant team, always there to help implement those plans, because no one likes to see the planning process completed if those tools aren't updated and implemented. All right, so now I will pass it over to Suhag.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Now, since Michael talked about the housing and the zoning ordinances, I'm going to keep rolling forward with the same theme. I'm going to pick up a case study from a city of Rocky Mount in North Carolina. This is an issue where the city with a 50,000 population had an acute affordable housing. And what I want to showcase is how technology could play a role in determining what and where and how much affordable housing, or even go and vet the current affordable housing policy. And there's no better example than Rocky Mount, where we took into consideration all the ArcGIS urban and city engine tools to be able to determine the affordable housing policy. So, to give you a little context, if household income, 30% of the household income is spent on housing, then it's called, that household is called as cost burden. And if it's more than 50% of the income is spent on housing, it's called severely cost burden. In case of city of Rocky Mount, it's more than about 20% of the household, they fall within the severely cost burden category. So you can only imagine. So I'm going to start this video. The way we went about doing this is, as a city planner, we wanted to identify the areas within the city where the current, based on the current population, where the affordable housing pockets naturally exist. And we looked back to different variables in GIS to see where we have better access to civic facilities, hospitals, urgent care, college, universities, libraries, pharmacy, access to public parks, transit. Of course, a lot of city-owned properties which are more prone for development than the private developer. Of course, certain type of zoning types were more leaning towards accommodating affordable housing. And to our surprise, some of the results were quite surprised, and in fact, even validated some of our results, because one of the developer was considering one of the sites that was naturally given through suitability analysis. So through this exercise, we identified 6 different catalytic sites, and the next job was to really take these results and do some of the scenario plans using ArcGIS Urban. So the video on the left here, it demonstrates very simple steps to start creating build farms on a desired site. It shows in urban, once you assign a particular site and apply the underlying zoning regulation, it will automatically start creating building volumes. It will also, we can also combine and merge parcels in case if you want to have a larger sites. Simply, we need to select a parcel and assign a different space use type. Here we took multifamily units, and it started creating different matrices such as number of households we are adding, the parking requirement, population, and dwelling units. This first step was just to kind of get ourselves familiar with the process. And in the advanced stage, we were able to create more defined building profiles. We started giving more green spaces and start to put together a picture of number of dwelling units versus open spaces in comparison with the overall site. Now we are getting into more nitty-gritty. We are relaying the actual zoning regulations and applying back to the sites. We could also start applying some of the shadow analysis and line of sight analysis just to kind of figure it out if you're encroaching someone's privacy or if you're going to overpower in terms of shadow to our neighbors. Here, in this particular stage, we started to kind of apply some of the dwelling units in this particular scenario. So in this specific scenario, we were able to generate about 51 units, and the parking ratio is 2 per dwelling units, making about 102 parking spots. So basically, 10% of them have to be affordable housing. So we have 10 affordable housing units, total units were 100, and the parking requirement of 102. At this rate, the current affordable housing policy could accommodate only 4% of the 250 affordable housing goal in the next 5 years. So basically, it will take about, this site was about 2.5 acres. It will take about 25 such sites, which seems like a very unlikely scenario. We also learned that it also triggered a thought process that is the current housing policy sufficient or take the real world market condition into account? Do we need to tweak our policy? Is the current housing policy set to be not successful? So basically, the city was waiting for more than 5 years to get this process going, and we could just figure it out that the way the current affordable housing policy is set out, it's just designed to make the project almost unworthy. So what we ended up doing is we started tweaking the affordable housing policy. We increased the density bonus so that they can build more affordable housing units, but it gives them an ability to almost double their number of units allowed. So in this scenario, basically what we ended up doing is we assigned single bedroom facilities about 750 square foot dwelling units versus two bedroom at 1200 square feet, and we applied that density bonus. So the parking requirements remain the same, but they can yield more dwelling units out of it. And just by tweaking this minor little scenario, we were able to generate a lot more units than previously anticipated. And basically, we could, depending on if you're building more single family or two bedroom units, we could achieve a 8 to 13% of the goal. So now we could see that just by, we can test these scenarios and test these different theories out just to see if we are in alignment or not. Uh, in this particular instance, we just added one more floor. So the point I'm trying to make is with a three-story option, we are able to about 12 to 19% of the goal. And finally, when we have a four-story option, we could accomplish about 15% to 25% of the 250 goal. And keep in mind that this is just one of the site. So if we extrapolate that to the six of the sites available, the original goal of building 250 affordable housing units in the next 5 years seems possible, and it's doable based on the math that we could come up with, right? So I'm just trying to showcase that through this entire exercise, that this is a 2.5 acre site. We got other sites that are more than 6 acres, 7 acres. So it gave the city all the logical reasoning and the data sets that they wanted to analyze it. And based on that, the city was able to tweak the affordable housing policy and revise the policy and got into action. This was done about fall of last year. So we haven't quite seen the results of it, but the process has been put in motion. The work that we did for City of Rocky Mount was quite appreciated. This also got an ESRI's Special Achievement in GIS Award in the last year's SVUC. So the city is extremely excited about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say it out loud here is that you may have a different ideas, a different policies in mind. There are technology tools out there that you can use those tools to be able to uh, go back, test those theories out so you can truly know before you build. With that, I am going to pass it back to Sean Norton, and I will come back at a later time. Sean, back to you.
Thanks, Suhag. I just want to say, Sean Norton, I am happy to be here and glad that everybody here has joined. I'd like to talk a little bit about comprehensive planning approach. As Michael mentioned earlier, data informs decisions and recommendations when it comes to planning. And behind those standard data sets that we typically look at to gain an understanding of our current or existing conditions within a community, collecting feedback from the community members itself is critically important. So what I'd like to do today is spend a little time to discuss that importance and methods by which we can engage the public in a more meaningful way to make it easier for the communities and to make it rather easier for communities that we are working with to be more of a partner in the process. So we have this combined effort that we're making that's moving the goalpost in the right direction. So again, public engagement, it's a critical component of the planning process. It allows us to ensure that the needs and priorities of residents, businesses, and stakeholders are captured and reflected in the plans. And that's very important, especially with comprehensive planning, where we're looking at, the next 10, 15 years in a community and developing an approach that allows us to tackle some of these challenges or desires that the community has in a way that's meaningful and allows us to build consensus. So there's a lot of different methods traditionally that we use, but then also non-traditionally that can be used as well. So, to facilitate meaningful public input, there's a lot of different activities that we can take. We, typically will use interactive workshops and surveys to conduct this exercise where we gather and collect feedback from individuals, but there's also online tools and other types of events that we can have where we pop up in, if a community is having a parade or some event that typically draws a large number of the residents that live there. It gives us an opportunity to engage and interact with them. There are other types of approaches that we can take also when engaging with stakeholders. Taking activities like busing or walking tours so that we can look at other communities are tackling some shared challenges. And then also facilitating listening sessions, whether we're going to shadow a city staff member to develop a better appreciation for their day-to-day activities and some of the challenges that they face. These methods allow us to collect and incorporate that feedback in a manner that informs plan goals, objectives, and strategies. Again, there are many different ways that you can engage the public. One of the ways that we find is really effective is through project branding. And from the beginning, developing an image and a messaging platform that conveys consistency so that people attach that image to the project that we're working on. And so when they see that, they understand there's a connection here. We're on this planning process. Project websites are very important. They allow us to maintain a measure of transparency and communicate updates about the projects, and then also provides a workspace for us to integrate online tools. Again, those community surveys are super important. The workshops are important. This video that's playing on a loop here is an example of one such workshop that we conducted recently. And as you can see, we had quite a few members of the public that came in to participate in this. And we were able to collect a treasure trove of data. We provided coloring sheets that we had put together for the community, for children who were there so that their parents were able to participate and be able to focus on the activities and interact with us without worrying about taking care of their kids at the same time. Additionally, developing outreach toolkits that could include social media content and images that can just simply be copied and pasted by the city or the community onto their digital platforms so that any followers that they have receive that information. And it helps in a manner, if you think about it, with city staff who are often time constrained. So if they have something simple to implement, it certainly is helpful in promoting and making aware the public of upcoming activities and updates in the project. Again, you can add flyers to that. We've developed door hangers to distribute through community in areas where, say, we're not getting enough survey response. Stickers are a great takeaway, especially for kids, and it just increases that overall brand awareness there. And other engagement activities like the visioning sessions, which are critically important for comprehensive planning processes and other planning processes as well. Get to the next slide here. So, as I mentioned, the outreach toolkits are important. If you want to have an effective engagement from the public, you need strategic outreach efforts. Here's one such example where we were participating in a community branding project, and through the survey results identified that there was a large amount of the student population, two large universities in the city of Denton, who were underrepresented in the survey responses. So we set up a pop-up event on campus and invited students in between classes to come and take part in the survey itself. We incentivized them by offering donuts. Food always is our opportunities to convince people to engage and interact. So incentivizing them, even in small ways, is certainly helpful with that. In addition to that, we've got, the time constraints, as I mentioned. I just want to reiterate, there is often time and resource limitations on city staff, so putting together a toolkit that can be used for easily deploying, engaging the community is a very useful tool to add to your arsenal of engagement approaches. Those, again, will help you promote surveys, general awareness and updates about the project throughout the entire planning process. It establishes a rapport so that you can build confidence and trust in the community, particularly when they experience that listening, that feedback that you are receiving from them is being applied to the planning process so that their voices are not silenced. And I just also want to reiterate that it's important in communication, if you want people to provide you with feedback, meet them where they are. And once again, incentivize that engagement. If you can offer some small takeaway for your participants, you'll find yourself with a higher engagement rate, collecting the information that you need. So as part of that data-driven analysis, analyzing all of the components, the traditional type of data sets that we typically look at, involving demographics, your economic data, infrastructure information from your streets and water infrastructure to the age of your housing stock, as Michael was alluding to earlier. When you augment that with your community input and the vision that's established, you have a more comprehensive understanding of those future needs, so you can make use a more informed decision-making process. Utilize the output from the data synthesis for tailoring those policies to address those unique challenges and opportunities. And then when you place an emphasis on listening to the community, you will be able to develop a consensus-built approach for effective planning processes and outputs. So key takeaways that I just want you to walk away with is engage early and often. From the start of your project, be ready to roll out your engagement strategy so that people are informed from the very beginning, and make it memorable. Brand that project in a manner that's recognizable for the community, and really be creative with your engagement strategy. More often, we're seeing that in order to be effective at engaging the community, you need to think outside of the box and employ tools and resources that aren't necessarily traditional, but tend to have a tremendous impact. Make your strategy for communication and public engagement easy to market. Developing those ready-to-deploy resources for public awareness and engagement, again, has a tremendous impact and makes a difference on the outcome of public activities. And then once again, listen to your community. It knows itself best. Be intentional with your listening practices and leverage all of that feedback that you collect for an informed development of the plan that you're working on. That's the information that I want to provide to you today. I'm going to hand over the control to Ryan so he can take it from here.
Hey, Sean, I think we have a question. Thank you, Athena, for submitting it. She's asking a question. Do you recommend providing food or snacks during that meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I will take that question really quick. As I mentioned, we offer donuts to students in between classes. When you offer food and refreshments, oftentimes we will hold our public activities during outside of traditional work hours, outside of the workday, so that more families can attend. And when you offer those refreshments, maybe before or around dinner time, it certainly makes it a lot easier for keeping people engaged, so that they're not rushing to leave so they can take off to dinner or anything. But certainly include those in your outreach.
Thank you. And for everyone, for all the attendees, feel free to type in your Q&A in that Q&A box, and we can address them later. But thank you so much for asking that question. Back to you, Ryan.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Ryan Wells. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services for the City of Fate, Texas. I'm going to get this slideshow going here. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. Sean and Michael did a great job going over some of the familiar but essential activities to plan your community out, set your future goals, set the path and trajectory for your community for often a couple of decades. My part of the presentation is about implementing those plans in a certain way. The City of Fate, Texas, we have employed a relatively unique but decreasingly unique, thankfully, approach to evaluating our development plans with a view of fiscal analysis. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. If I can get these things moving here. Just 1 second here. My keyboard isn't working, forgive me. All right, so the City of Fate, Texas, we are a city of just shy of about 30,000 in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We're about 25 miles as a crow flies from Dallas. Depending on the time of day, it can take 30 minutes to an hour and a half to get from Fate into the city. But we are basically a second ring suburb out in Rockwall County on the other side of the big old lake, Lake Ray Hubbard, on the east side of Dallas. I don't know why my clicker isn't, but there we go. All right, so promise it was working earlier. All right. Okay, so like I said, we are a city that is taking kind of a different approach to managing our land use policies, and our particular focus is on fiscal sustainability. So cities, when they plan out their city's future, they tend to look at, land uses and master thoroughfare plans and zoning and the built environment. And that's all, of course, very important. But every one of those decisions has a tangible financial impact to the city's bottom line. And so as we began to understand that, we wanted to actually put data to that understanding and look at our city and set the goals ahead of us based on, to a certain degree, what the financial implications of those decisions would be. So back in 2021, we actually adopted a new comprehensive plan that was very focused on the fiscal impacts of the comprehensive plan and the land use policies that would be included in that plan. So this is an image of that from the comprehensive plan that shows the value per acre by parcel of many of the developed lots within the city of Fate. And basically, it's an extruded map from GIS showing the higher the column, it basically means the higher the value per acre of land within the city. So you can see in the center of the city, there's this really tall red pillar That's actually right in the heart of our historic downtown, and a vertical mixed use project that was in place at the time really just outperformed all of the other land use types throughout the city. And we'll get a little bit more into that, what the implications are of those different values based on land use. So when we get a new zoning application in, we run it through this fiscal analysis model that we created as a city with some help from some very knowledgeable consultants over time. And this is simply an Excel worksheet. And we do this fiscal analysis because we want, as a whole, a more fiscally productive community. We want the projects to be more fiscally productive that result in a net revenue to the city. And we don't want to support a land use pattern that ultimately digs us deeper and deeper in the hole, where a generation or two from now, we have our children's children paying for that deficit that we've created through bad land use policy. And so that 2021 comprehensive plan calls for a fiscally sustainable growth pattern, which includes not only the comprehensive plan level land use designations, but action items that continue to push us forward into supporting fiscally productive land use policy. And so this spreadsheet that you see on the right, it has certain categories that we evaluate based on data that we collect both from the developer as well as from some publicly available data. And I will let everybody here know this spreadsheet is on our website at fatetx.gov. I freely share it with anybody who wants to look at it, use it, and modify it. Give me a call. I'll be happy to go over it with you. It's not proprietary. We want people to understand this very important facet of land management in a city, and hopefully apply some of this philosophy to your own planning policies. So when we use this tool, we look at a couple of different things. We look at under that green header contribution to paying for city services. We look at what kind of revenues this project can actually generate for the city, and that usually comes in the form of property taxes and sales taxes. Now, I know different states have different policies. Some don't collect property tax, some don't have sales tax. So again, this can be modified to be specific to your jurisdiction. But here in Texas, we actually do collect property and sales taxes. So based on data, again, that we collect from the developer, from publicly accessible data, we put in some numbers that estimate how much property value would be generated by this project, how much annual sales tax we expect would be generated based on formulas that we built into this spreadsheet. And then we ultimately get an annual expected contribution at project build out of what this specific project can generate. So that's the net, that's the ends, that's the inputs. Of course, when there's a new project that comes into a city, we also have outputs. We also have expenses that the city is ultimately going to be responsible for in perpetuity to serve this project and the infrastructure that serves that project. So we also look at that. We look at the cost to serve from all of the municipal services that we provide. What is the cost to serve that particular project? And we use a proportionate area formula, basically an acreage of the project. And we have some numbers that we've generated based on our municipal budget that estimates how much that project is actually going to cost the city through the form of expenses. We also look at the roads. And so roads are by far maybe equivalent to your public service, your public safety aspects of a proportion of the municipal budget. But road maintenance and ultimately road replacement is generally the highest cost of a city. And so we actually look at the depreciated value of the roads that are built as part of that project and the roads that are adjacent to that project to figure out if the inputs generated by that project can actually cover long-term the maintenance and replacement of those roadways. Otherwise, if you're not able to cover those costs, again, in the future, you're going to have to come up with that money somehow to pay to rebuild those roads when they ultimately and inevitably fall apart. So those are the outputs. We have the inputs in the form of taxes and other fees that we understand come from these projects. The outputs are the cost for roads and also general administrative services. Then at the bottom, we have these productivity metrics, revenue to cost, public to private ratio, things that we've just generated as a way to more efficiently convey what the productivity of that project is. And so this Excel spreadsheet, again, available to the public. You're welcome to download it from our website. We also more recently adopted this ArcGIS urban model, and that's what I'm going to talk about for the remainder of this, to try to put a little bit more of a form to this idea of fiscal productivity. I'm sorry, I'm not getting a lot of response from my keyboard here. So we had this big project come in called Lafayette Crossing. We really started having earnest conversations with the developer of this project back in 2022, 23. And we wanted to do something a little bit more elevated in order to evaluate the fiscal productivity of this project. It's 267 acres right on the north side of I-30, a huge highway that goes through the middle of town. And it was going to provide a mix of uses that were going to really elevate and become a game changer for our community, which had more historically been more of a bedroom community. We haven't had a lot of commercial development. We're seeing a change in that now, just organically, but this was going to be a project that really was going to change things for our community for the better. So we created a model in Arc Urban that replicated the concept plan, that 2D concept plan that was on that previous slide. We created a 3D model based on the anticipated building densities, building heights, and building use types, and worked with Esri directly to create this model that would help us calculate the fiscal productivity of the project based on the anticipated development density and patterns, but also a maximum allowable density based on the planned development that was ultimately adopted to entitle this project. And so we created this model that had this dashboard on the side that had those same metrics that I talked to you about in the Excel spreadsheet. We translated that into back-end formulas and algorithms in the Arc Urban model that would spit out these numbers as we change things on the fly. So again, that development summary, the city revenue, the cost to serve, those same metrics that we're familiar with and that we use to determine the productivity, we translated into this model. And so here you see those buildings have elevated in height. Now we have those maximum building heights, and we have a difference. For example, the sales tax revenue is kind of in the middle here, 1.68 million at the proposed density. Now we're moving over to almost 6 million if the maximum, generated allowable building heights and densities were actually built. So we can do scenario planning with this model to look at both area-wide as well as building-specific scenarios to determine what might be the most efficient and most productive development pattern across an area or a site. So again, when we zoom into a specific property or building, again, we have this model shows us the various uses that are on that building, the percentages, the total square foot. And then we have some other calculations, not just fiscal, but also just those more kind of dimensional and bulk standards that planners are familiar with, the number of dwelling units, the total building footprint, the floor area ratio. So we want to make sure we also continue to look at things from a holistic kind of aesthetic and community building point of view. But again, we also built on that fiscal productivity standard that, again, our city is just adopted as a tried and true model of understanding long-term implications and fiscal impacts to those decisions. So again, if we elevate the building height, we add more floors, maybe change the uses, those more dimensional standards and performance standards will also change. And again, this is all based on a back-end kind of spaghetti logic formula that we won't get into today, but it's pretty intense. But once it's set up, you can do a lot very quickly and very efficiently. So this is two examples of the same building, but we have different number of floors, different uses, and the metrics are changing. So it's our internal method to evaluate development options and look at different alternatives. We run the fiscal analysis, we look at different design, and we look at changes in uses and how that ultimately affects the performance of that building. And we can quickly switch between the variables on the fly. And I'm going to show you in a second what that looks like. And look at, again, site-specific or ultimately area-wide scenarios to determine the performance as well as the fiscal productivity of that project. So I'm going to go to this video. So this is, again, that same Lafayette Crossing project, and this is the total metrics for the whole project. We have, $2.8 million of revenue, all the lane mile costs. Again, those road replacement costs are enormous, and that's an annual. But when we click on a building, then it actually gives us the metrics of that specific building. So again, we have the 13.7 thousand dollars of sales tax revenue. If we go into the back end, we can add a number of floors to that same building. We can also select each floor and change the uses. So here we have a mixed use building. We want to add some more office to that building. So we're going to change 2 floors to offices. And when we calculate that, when we run that and accept that change, it's not only going to graphically change that building structure and view so that the decision makers can actually see what that building would look like in those different scenarios, but it also changes the metrics in the dashboard. So before we had, I'm going to pause it here for a second if I can. Before we had the $13.78 thousand in sales tax revenue, that didn't change because we didn't add any more retail. But the second line item is the total revenue from the project. So that includes property taxes. Before, when we had a 4-story building with ground floor retail and residential on the upper 3 floors, we had about $15,000 all revenue from the project. Adding the additional 2 floors and changing some of those floors to office, now we're calculating a $36,000 property tax revenue from this building. And again, that's based on the assumed metrics that we build into the model and those changes that we can do for any floor on the fly for any building. It allows us to run that calculation and see what that fiscal productivity looks like. So again, this is something we've really adopted as a practice. We've done it dozens of times, hundreds of times even, across various projects over many years. Something that we obviously invested into technology to help us understand this better and look at different ways of displaying this information to the decision makers. But I'm glad to have been able to share with you a little bit of what we do here in FATE on fiscal analysis and our application of technology to support our mission to be a fiscally sustainable community. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Suhag, and I'll be happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it. Now, let me just switch gears and show you a different screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. I hope you can see my screen. And I think we are approaching the time as well, so I'm going to be a bit quicker. But the way what Ryan was explaining in the post-planning process, there are tools that all the city staff and city planners would need in order to get them to do their jobs better or day-to-day workflow better, right? So what we did was we took a slightly different approach, and what I want to showcase it to you that how we leverage GIS technology in order to help or aid day-to-day workflow to the planners. And I'm going to give you a simple example. While we're doing a lot of market research, we figured out that a lot of times folks come into the city, they want to ask questions and figure it out where they can build certain type of developments. So what we thought, why can't we automate some of those naturally asked questions and give you the tools that can just revolutionize in how you answer back? So basically what we did was we built a 3D interactive mapping application. This is for a city of Littleton, Colorado, where with a click of a button, we can replace 6 to 7 different resources that the planners need in order to answer even the simplest of the simplest questions to a lot of complicated questions, meaning you exactly know what it looks like on the ground. We know what regulations are applicable. So if you are looking for parking and loading standard, it will directly take you to parking and loading standards. And we have narrowed down the entire logic to a point where we exactly know at a parcel level what sort of regulations are applicable, and the rest of those hundreds of pages of zoning regulations don't even have to look into it. Of course, we know the ownership information, ADUs, if that's applicable or not, but we also know all the setback standards, meaning all the minimum lot area requirement, front setbacks, side setbacks, all of that in simple one click. This is when it comes to a simple query, but sometimes we come across situation where somebody comes in, a developer says, I want to build an office building. So we build a tool where we can find out. So let's see, if I want to build an office building, I simply click on it and I would just simply click on the view and map. And I'm going to have to do this. What it does is it gives you a filtered view of where that office can be built. And the rest of the city with the blank area, you just don't have to worry about it. Now let's just take an example for a second. If the developer has a set of different addresses, so we have built what we call as a geocoding tool where you have a bunch of addresses that you can simply click and point. So we can identify those sites directly on the map, and we can clearly see that there are only 2 sites that's applicable. And now we can simply go closer to one of those. We can click on any of the sites. Of course, we know what it looks like. We have entire history and what you cannot do. But the click of a button, we can actually check the build potential of that parcel. Now, based on the underlying zoning regulations, we can see the development pattern in 3D, but more importantly, we can change as and if we need it. So the office is 15 feet, so you can change it to 15 feet. This is 8 feet, we can change that, and height is about 80 to 91 feet, we can change that in a jiffy. So just like that, we are able to visualize the information in 3D, and that's the power that we want to give the planners and the city staff, where the entire logic of what is possible to do is no longer institutional knowledge. It is like a planner with a 1 day, 1 week, or 1 month worth of experience versus a planner with 10 years of experiences. Here, the mapping application, the logic that is developed or automation that is developed is able to provide the same level of quality of answers with a planner with 10 years versus 1 month. And that's exactly what we are trying to do, approach for the post-planning process where automation takes precedent. Before, I just want to show you one more thing. Okay. So here, I want to show you is very quickly that these are the different Esri tools. The point I'm trying to make here is Esri has got thousands of tools, 200 plus geoprocessing tools, 100 plus spatial analytical tools, and hundreds of product releases each year. It's a fast moving target, and there are more than 73% of the local governments are still using older version of the desktop software. And the point I'm trying to make here is that when you are seeing all of these interconnected, you get to see that it's much more complicated than it is. And I can, if I simplify the logic where in an O'Reilly Auto Part company, if you know, if you can buy all the parts to build an engine or the entire car, only if you knew what part goes where, in what order, and how to configure it. And same way in Azure's ecosystem, if you know all of these tools, these are interconnected, if you know how to configure them, only then and only then you are able to carve out the automation that you're looking for. And with our proprietary tools, that's what we are trying to do. We have solved that puzzle where we have put these tools into a specific order so that it does do the job that you're looking to do. Along with the same time, I'm also seeking a little bit of your help. We are doing a lot of research. These automation tools, we want to take it further. We are in the process of talking to more than 14 different cities, 20 different officials, 6 different personas within the city, trying to figure it out. What is it that the city planners are looking to solve? What type of puzzles that they want to solve? And for that, we have a little Google form that we have created. We would extremely and greatly appreciate it if you, all the local government folks out there, if you take 2 to 3 minutes of your time and let us know that these are the potential areas that you would like to automate. Okay, I know we are approaching time, but I want to open up the concluding remarks and open up for Q&A. But I want to bring Ryan, Sean, Michael, and kind of contribute to the departing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Suha. I'll kick us off with just a couple of these concluding remarks. So Do engage all stakeholders and city departments. We want to leverage the data and information that they have that you may not be getting otherwise. So do not operate in a silo. Combine data tools with thoughtful analysis. Do not forget to take advantage of technology and tools to reach a broad audience. I'll pass over to Sean.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that. Don't overlook addressing staff pain points, because this is a great opportunity when we go through planning processes, whether it's through a zoning update or a housing study or a comprehensive plan. Oftentimes there are experiences that staff have that gives us certain insight into things. So it's important to make sure you hear those pain points and address those in an effective manner.
And I guess the things that I would add are the data are important, the tools are important, but you also have to be thoughtful about how you use them. You know, you want to just keep a critical mind on applying the data, understanding what you need to use, where you need to get the data from, and put it through a thoughtful analysis so you can get the results that you're looking for. And then also applying those metrics consistently. Of course, there's circumstances where you need to be a little bit more agile and adaptable, but you also want to be consistent. So if you're comparing apples to, two things, it's apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So you want to be consistent with those metrics. And then finally, the technology provides a means to achieve a desired outcome, right? It's desired data, but there's more to it than just the technology. There's more to it to us than just a fiscal analysis. We also want to create an attractive and inviting and exciting community. And so just making sure that you keep that other stuff in mind, the less quantitative stuff in mind when you're doing your planning and your in your analysis.
And I'll just add just one more point is that technology can play a bigger role ever than before. Think about ways, the tasks that can be automated. So look inside on your daily workflow and see if a technology has an answer. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. However, you can still leverage a lot of these tools available through Esri's ecosystem and many other software providers that could probably make your life a whole lot better. It will make your workflow more efficient, time save. Time save is cost saving. So that I would highly recommend that look into automation. But I know we are right around 1 hour time mark. If you all can stay back, I would love to address some of the Q&As that has come through on a Q&A session, but also on a personal chat. I think is it okay, Michael, Ryan, Sean, if you can take 5 or 7 more minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, I think one of them here that I can see in the Q&A is we don't see many greenscapes. Blue is generally flood. Is this in a floodway, floodplain, or which way is runoff? I think that's a question from Athena. Athena, can you expand a little bit more on that while I go to the second question, I believe? I think this question is for you, Ryan. Can cities regulate land use based on financial projections?
That's a good question, one I get a lot. We don't tend to regulate based on financial projections, and I would caution anybody to using that as a metric for approving or denying a project. We actually explicitly did not codify the fiscal analysis into our zoning code, our Unified Development Ordinance, because as soon as you make it a criterion for approval or denial of a project, you lose the educational aspect of it. And what we're primarily trying to do is educate our community on what development patterns will actually, pay the bills and what need to be basically subsidized by other activities. So we don't regulate based on fiscal performance, but we also do lay out the plan based on an assumed fiscal target. So that's the difference that we apply.
Awesome. I think there are 2 more questions for you, Ryan, but I think this one is for Michael. How do cities respond to state legislative updates?
Very, very carefully. No, I think it is, as many of you are aware, you don't want to act too soon. And so sometimes these legislative updates that have to do with land use policies and staffing we need to kind of wait and see if there's going to be a challenge, if they will work their way through the system. So it's pretty common to wait a cycle or two to really see if there will be some of those challenges. And then if those are actually accepted, then we do need to start working the way through the process. Ultimately, it's city staff working with your legal and trying to see what your risk tolerance is. But ultimately, you will need to update your ordinances and regulations.
Awesome. I
Thank you.
think this question is for you, Sean. It is asking that how do you address the challenge of engaging members of the public who don't typically show up for the public meetings? A classic public engagement question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Dare I say that's a challenge that most cities or all cities face, from planning processes and activities to general civic engagement. I'd like to reiterate, I guess, 2 points that I made earlier: meeting people where they are and incentivizing that engagement. So if you have a general understanding of a community's composition, build into your plan a way to identify who is and who is not engaging. So if it's a particular geography, then develop a strategy that involves a pop-up in that area. Or if there's a potential language barrier, reduce the barrier by offering translation services on your project website or in survey tools, or work with city staff to identify a community member who could potentially serve as a liaison to assist with facilitating that outreach.
I think, Ryan, I think your topic is very popular. I think this question is for you. How detailed is the assumed project matrix to estimate the sales tax revenue? With a free market, how can you pinpoint the type of commercial or retail development that will come to your community?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and one that we admittedly still struggle with on the sales tax side. Property tax is pretty easy because we have so many examples in our community. We use a couple of different resources. We actually subscribe to a program called Exact Tax that actually takes available sales tax data from the comptroller's office, anonymizes it, but assigns it to different business classes. And that way we can, basically determine how much, sales tax, tax generating sales these companies create based on classification. And then we just assign it to the square footage, and we can get a pretty decent calculation or estimate. We also use some local economic development consultants to provide us some pro forma level sales tax generation numbers for different use types. We often don't get that number from the actual developer itself, but again, this is an estimate, but we feel pretty confident that we get pretty close on that.
Can I ask you a curious question, Ryan? Based on what I've learned from you, I always have this curious question. Well, let's say many projects, whenever it's commercial retail, obviously fiscally, it probably provides positive dollar values to the city's coffers, right? But a lot of residential development, particularly single family, they may not be, because you serve a lot, you provide a lot of services. So obviously it puts a lot of pressure on the city budget. Now, when you have these competing projects coming in, some are positive for you, some are not so. How do you do the decision making internally? I always have that question in my mind.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. And ultimately, what we don't want to do is make an assumption or expectation that every project is going to pay for itself, because that's not going to happen. As you rightly say, Suhag, like traditional suburban scale densities of single family detached residential don't typically kind of cover their own costs. But the thing is, that's okay, because when we set out our land use pattern, we understood that, and we made it so that ultimately when the city builds out to that level that we're expecting by like 2040, as long as we get those commercial and mixed use and non-residential developments, or even multifamily developments that do tend to kind of cover their own costs, is based on the density and the generation of sales tax and other fees, we know that that's effectively going to subsidize that single family residential development to a degree that we'll end up in the black. Assuming everything's, correct in our estimates, we'll end up in the black and be in good shape. That's what we want ultimately. We don't want to, require every project to pay for itself, because that puts undue burden and unrealistic expectations across the board. And it's not a judgment based, a judgment of single family as a bad development pattern. It's absolutely not. It's the backbone of communities. But we just need to understand that a bedroom community that's predominantly single family detached is going to have a hard time paying its bills in the long run.
Makes sense. Well, I have three more questions, but I have one poll to ask you, if you don't mind. If I know you will have more questions once you have a time to digest everything, and you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. But feel free, if you want us to get in touch with you or anyone specific individual here want to be, you want to ask more questions, feel free. Our contact information is also on the slide, and feel free to call or email, I guess. And I'm just gonna keep it open for a few more seconds. Awesome. I'm just gonna end the poll. Well, thank you all. We greatly appreciate it. I know you could be doing so many other things, important items, but you took the time to be with us, and we just want to say thank you very much, and we greatly appreciate it. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.